We humans were born from the earth, and yet we stand alone among all life. We have harnessed natural resources and invented new technologies, developed diverse cultural traditions, created art and music, and much more. Other animals certainly demonstrate similar behaviours. Crows use tools to obtain food. Ants participate in complex societies within their colonies, and chimpanzees have even gone to war. But no organism on Earth has approached our capacity for complex thought. How did our lineage transform from small-brained scavengers struggling to survive against fierce predators to masters of hunting, agriculture, and domestication? We are animals seemingly outside of the natural world in which we evolved, who bend the earth to our will. Are our big brains alone the real reason behind this? And can they be used to explain our complex behavior and intelligence? The brain is an ancient organ that developed over 500 million years ago. As the seat of the nervous system, it regulates bodily functions and helps animals make sense of and navigate the complex world around them. Almost all animals have brains, ranging from little more than a cluster of cells to giant organs weighing up to 9 kilograms. Generally, the larger the body, the bigger the brain. Large bodies require more energy and coordination, and thus larger brains to keep them alive, while small bodies can get by with less. However, a large brain doesn't necessarily lead to more intelligence. Humans have far from the largest brains on Earth, weighing only an average of 1.3 kilograms. Sperm whales have brains that are more than 5 times larger. Instead, rather than absolute brain size, one important characteristic is the relative size of the brain compared to what is expected based on the animal's body size. It is thought that large brains in small bodies would have leftover energy after accounting for basic vital functions, which could then be put towards cognitive functions. And compared to other mammals of the same body size, the human brain is nearly 8 times larger than expected. Our average brain size, measured as endocranial volume, is roughly 1,350 cubic centimeters. Comparatively, chimpanzees' brains are on average approximately 380 cubic centimeters. Brain size alone doesn't tell the full story, because not all brains are created equal. The most salient factors associated with intelligence may instead be anatomical, particularly the number of brain cells that process information, known as neurons. In animals like rodents, more neurons lead to larger neurons. These larger neurons take up more space, limiting how large their brains can get. Primates, however, break away from this pattern. As the number of neurons in our brain increases, the neurons stay the same size. This means that primates may fit many more neurons into a much smaller space, allowing us to process significantly more information without needing a correspondingly large brain. To put this in perspective, if a rodent's brain grew to contain the same number of neurons as our human brain, the rodent's brain would weigh an astounding 35 kilograms, a physically impossible feat. primates are also unique in where our neurons are concentrated. Compared to other mammals, primates have more neurons in the cerebral cortex, the region of the brain responsible for cognition, memory, awareness, language, and decision-making. You may sense this when seeing our closest living relatives, chimpanzees and bonobos, engaging in behaviours uncannily like our own. Hunting, grooming their children, and tickling each other, showing flickers of consciousness and emotion that remind us of our deep, shared past. But what then distinguishes us from them? Brains are complicated, so the answer likely is as well. As the primate with the largest brain, we humans have the most neurons overall compared to all our relatives. This means that we have the most neurons in the cortex of any animal on the planet, giving us the most resources to devote to a higher level of thinking. Rather than the brain size alone, it is likely the combination of our neuron-packed brain and its distinctively large size that set the stage for finer scale changes in our brain's anatomy, development, and interconnectivity, further propelling us into where we are today. Our large economical brain, however, is an incredible recent development. What triggered this pivotal change that altered the course of our history and the history of the rest of the life on Earth? Since I got this guy, I've seen a different level of intelligence, and something that makes me question: is it even our brains that make us this intelligent, or is it a combination of things? Obviously, we have one of the I think the most neuron-packed brain out of any animal, so that will go a long way to helping us be this intelligent. But is it a combination of our hands, our posture, our whole construction of how our throat works and how our mouth moves and our tongue, that can maybe form language? Yeah, it's really made me think a lot more about how we're this intelligent, and if maybe emotionally and socially if other animals are as intelligent as us. We like to think of ourselves as the most intelligent animals on the earth, and we definitely are technologically, and in terms of our infrastructure and our domination around the world, and in terms of hunting as well. But in terms of social intelligence and emotional intelligence, are we the most intelligent animal? Because we've recently discovered that dolphins may have a language that we're not sure quite how sophisticated it is, but we know they have accents, they have names. We don't know how wolves communicate properly with each other. They seem to have just an understanding where they hunt of where they're meant to be and where this wolf is going, without any sort of visual communication that we understand, at least. And animals like elephants and wolves and dolphins and orcas and whales, do they have a language that we simply just don't understand? And because we don't understand it, we think that it's less advanced and therefore less intelligent than ours. And I think that it's just assuming, and I think we need to do a lot more research into this to find out how advanced and how intelligent are these animals. The searing afternoon sun bakes the golden grasses and scruffy shrubs. Most animals are resting in the heat of the day, trying to conserve their energy before beginning the search for dinner at twilight. The lions in particular will wait until nighttime, using their acute eyesight to guide them as they stalk their prey. At last, the air begins to cool as dusk approaches, and the savannah comes alive. A small group of Australopithecus africanus, well acquainted with the sudden shift in energy, prepares to mobilize. They, however, are not among the hunters, but the hunted. They stay close together and try to avoid being seen or smelled, by the many potential predators prowling around what is now South Africa 3 million years ago. After nearly an hour of waiting, their opportunity arrives at last. A nearby lion has killed a young springbok. They watch the feast impatiently as the last light leaves the sky. Finally, after the lion had gorged herself on the young buck and leaves the site of the kill, the Australopithecine group descends on what scraps remain. They hurry, for their competition is not far behind. The group eats what they can before scampering back into the darkness after hearing the haunting calls of hyenas quickly approaching. Versions of this scene had played out each night for millions of years across hominin genera and would continue for nearly another million. Rather than a monumental shift from prey to tool-wielding big-brained predators, the emergence of our genus Homo, which first appears in the fossil record 2.8 million years ago, seems to have been a more subtle transition than previously thought. Homo rudolfensis, for example, still had relatively large teeth and a broad face, both of which are found in Australopithecus. Homo habilis had robust jaws, another basal feature. Even long-lived Homo erectus, recognised as being the first hominin to reach approximate modern human proportions, still had a brain half the size of ours 1.8 million years ago in Europe. As more fossils have been discovered in and outside of Africa, and others have been reinterpreted using newer methods, it has become clear that there was a lot of diversity among the kinds of humans that walked the earth between 1.5 and 3 million years ago. The defining features of our lineage appeared at different times and in different places. In spite of this, these early known Homo species do all share some important features that set them apart from our Australopith ancestors. They generally had larger brains, as seen through estimates of cranial capacity from the skull, as well as larger bodies. Compared to Australopithecus afarensis, the brains of Homo rudolfensis and Homo habilis were already more than 30% larger. Early Homo also generally had smaller teeth with more complex surfaces, suggesting that they ate softer foods and had a broader diet. This is supported by archaeological evidence for stone tools and butchery in Eastern Africa as early as 3.3 million years ago. Together, these signals indicate an increased reliance on energy-rich meat and bone marrow, which could have fueled brain growth roughly 2 million years ago. Significant anatomical and behavioural changes were emerging in our genus. However, our characteristically large brains, though getting bigger, were still yet to come and would in fact double in size over the next 2 million years as we discovered what may be the most important development in our genus: using controlled fire to cook food. You are now in my kitchen, and you're in my kitchen for a few reasons. Firstly, because I'm making food and time is of the essence, so I thought I'd get two things done at once. And secondly, because there are a few things to talk about in terms of food and brain. One feature that unites, I think, all humans culturally is food. As far as I'm aware, all modern humans cook most of their food, and it's something that brings us together. It's something that, you know, when we go to another culture, another part of the world, we can experience and we can bond over and we can learn about. because the food around the world, it varies massively. In all honesty, cooking changed the way that we evolved and changed the way we lived, and it changed the path that we took. And it did this in three main ways. Firstly, cooking starch and meat changes the calorie intake from the meat, and it's actually more calories from cooked starch and cooked meat than raw, just like this beautiful marinated chicken that I made. Secondly, cooking makes it easier to chew our food. Some other primates can take between 4 and 8 hours of their 12-hour day just chewing alone, and that's the thick vegetation. In some cases, like chimpanzees, it's meat. I wouldn't be able to chew it. I don't know about you, but I wouldn't be able to chew it personally. My mouth would be killing me compared to the tender steak and chicken and meat and veg that we make today. Yeah, chewing should really take up half of our day, but it doesn't. It only takes up about 5%. And could you imagine if you lost half your day to just chewing? You wouldn't be going to work. Yeah, I wouldn't be able to make these videos. I'm already running out of time now, that's why I'm making a video while I'm cooking. And you have to think about as well how that impacts technological advancement. If we're taking so much time chewing, we wouldn't be able to sit at home making these stone tools and Levallois tools and Achillean tools, and we wouldn't be spending time gathering. We'd just be chewing while we gathered because there's no time. And lastly, cooking is just way easier for our bodies to digest and absorb the nutrients. It's just, yeah, it's a completely different game. Once we cook it, it partly processes the food before it's even in our mouth. So once we've then digested it, it's way easier for our bodies to break down. And because it's easier, it also uses less energy. And because it uses less energy, we can direct that energy elsewhere, and other parts of our body, and towards the brain, which can increase the amount of neurons we have, increase size. So yeah, cooking. We see evidence of eating cooked food in the bones of our ancestors before we see it in the archaeological record. There is a massive increase in brain size in Homo erectus by 1.5 million years ago, at the same time that its teeth and jaws shrink. Strong signals that they relied on soft, energy-dense foods. However, while Homo erectus was almost certainly eating cooked food by this time, it is still unclear exactly when hominins began to intentionally and habitually cook. Much of the evidence for cooking is difficult to preserve and is indirect, such as the presence of burnt matter. These features are indicative of a past fire, but not necessarily one produced by hominins for cooking. The earliest evidence for intentional cooking comes even later, 780,000 years ago, at Ganesha Beno Yaakov, in what is now Israel and Palestine. The site contains stone tools, hearths, and huge quantities of fish remains. We now have tools that allow us to easily create fire and artificial heat for cooking at will. But in the past, fire was more difficult to generate. So, how were we able to harness its power? There is nothing but darkness. What was just a loud chorus of insects and nocturnal mammals under the starlight moments ago has become still and silent. The stars have been extinguished. The young Homo erectus, awoken by the eerie quiet, hugs her mother tighter. She cannot tell if her eyes are open or closed. Light suddenly rips across the sky, illuminating the savanna before her. Before she can even blink, the light vanishes, and everything around her is plunged into blackness once again. She shuts her eyes tightly and whimpers. Gradually, a low crackling sound emerges behind her. Her mother doesn't stir, but the young Homo erectus slowly opens her eyes and makes out a dim red glow dancing on the leaves of the acacia trees, across the shallow pond in front of her. She rises and slowly turns towards the sound. Not 50 meters on the hill before her is a wildfire, and it's growing. This is the first fire of the dry season, and the flames lick the sky as they consume the accumulated brush below. Though fires regularly occur during this time of year and may burn for weeks, this is the first wildfire the young Homo erectus can remember. For a moment, the popping and crackling of the fire is the only sound. Then suddenly, an explosion. The animal sounds return, but the chorus that normally lulls her to sleep has been replaced by galloping and shrieks as mammals and insects attempt to flee the flames. She, however, stands transfixed, watching the fire begin to slowly spread across the landscape up the gentle slope away from her. A primal instinct roots her to the spot, gazing at the flames. The stars return, twinkling in the curling smoke, and then comes the smell. She recognizes it instantly. Cooked meat. Her mouth waters. She scans the ground and sees a smouldering corpse lying on the hill outside the reach of the flames. She cautiously approaches it and recognizes it as a springbok, her favorite meal. The young male had run out of the flames, but it was too late. Flecks of red ember in the trampled grass illuminate the path he took before collapsing. So this was where the food and light came from. It had been several months since she had seen her family fiercely protect these glittering balls of light. Imitating her mother, the young Homo erectus scoops up one of these patches of smoking grass. She walks slowly back into the darkness towards her parents, now awakening in the commotion, and presents them with the glowing ember. There would be no more darkness tonight. We will never know exactly how our ancestors began to cook, but it was surely a complex process, perhaps filled with fear or wonder, beginning with exposure to natural fires on the landscape. The transition from eating wildfire cooked food to being able to create fire using technology likely involved multiple stages. Conceptualization of and habituation to fire, the ability to use and maintain fire, and the ability to produce it. These stages were not necessarily linear, and there was likely regional and temporal variations in these behaviours. Producing fire at will, however, appears nearly simultaneously in the archaeological record of Middle Pleistocene Eurasia around 400,000 years ago, and required advanced cognitive abilities and collaboration. Interestingly, the Middle Pleistocene is also when we see another jump in brain size, and hominins with brain sizes close to that of modern humans. The earliest Homo sapiens, 300,000 years ago, already had brains within the current range of variation. Indeed, along with or following this process of controlling fire, numerous characteristics developed that compromised the behavioural and cognitive abilities that were likely involved in the use and control of fire. Cooperation and exchange, cumulative social learning and cultural transmission, forms of language, and more. These in turn may have further spurred brain growth. These traits can be difficult to identify from the fossil and archaeological record, but forms of potential symbolism serve as proxies. In 1976, scientists discovered hominin fossils in the cave of Cima de los Huesos, meaning pit of bones in Spanish. The site dates to 430,000 years ago and is hugely significant because it contains the remains of 28 individuals, which were recently found to be some of the first Neanderthals. The spatial clustering of these individuals within the same stratum of the cave, combined with their age profiles consisting of only children through young adults, indicate that this was not a natural accumulation. They appear to have been deposited there intentionally. There is also no evidence of large carnivore bites, catastrophic falls, or other natural processes that could have brought them to their resting place. Perhaps most compelling is the presence of only a single lithic artifact, an exquisite quartz hand axe. It has therefore been argued that Cimadalos Jesus represents an incredibly early example of symbolic behaviour. There are no widespread examples of art, long-distance trade, or burial by Neanderthals nor humans for hundreds of thousands more years. The Middle and Late Pleistocene saw largely continued brain expansion, though with minor differences in neural anatomy and development between species, as shown from fossil skulls and endocasts, imprints of the brain on the internal surface of the skull. Though Neanderthals and Homo sapiens had similar brain sizes, the shapes differed. The Homo sapien brain is very globular, and it reached its current shape between 100 and 35,000 years ago. Analysis of the modern human, Neanderthal, and Denisovian genomes have also found differences at the genetic level, including some relating to increased modern human brain function and neuron development, particularly in the cortex. Whether these differences translated to differences in cognition and behaviour is unclear. What we do know is that both modern humans and Neanderthals engaged in clear symbolic behaviour after 100,000 years ago, with a noticeable increase between 40 and 50,000 years ago. It is during and after this period, the Upper Paleolithic, that humanity as we know it emerges and flourishes. Stunning depictions of animals cover cave walls, nearly appearing to move in flickering firelight. Community members are intentionally buried with care, and enigmatic, intricately carved figurines of women, perhaps related to fertility, appear across Europe. Over the next 30,000 years, Homo sapiens developed agriculture, domestication, written language, and the first cities. Empires rise and fall. We learn to control electricity, which is fire's natural origin. And 200 years after inventing the tin can, we invented artificial intelligence. There is a clear trend in increasing brain size in our genus over the last 2 million years. Two notable outliers, however, have upended our traditional understanding of our evolutionary history: Homo floresiensis and Homo naledi. These small-bodied species were separated by an ocean and a few 100,000 years, but both had exceptionally small brains for their time. Fossils of Homo floresiensis have been found on the island of Flores in Indonesia, dating between 100 and 80,000 years ago, with brain sizes of only 426 cubic centimeters, about the size of Australopithecus afarensis 3 million years prior. Stone tools on the island date to as old as 190,000 years ago. Similarly, fossils of Homo naledi from Rising Star Cave in South Africa have been dated to between 226 and 335,000 years ago and have endocranial volumes ranging from 465 to 560 cubic centimeters. While they haven't been found with tools, the nature of their deposition in the cave has led some to speculate that they were intentionally burying their dead. Because both species display combinations of ancient and more modern traits, it's likely that they represent late surviving offshoots of older hominins, such as Homo erectus, that had become isolated and had evolved on their own trajectories. Any interpretation of these species' origins, evolution, and cognitive capabilities is controversial, because Homo naledi and Homo floresiensis defy the pattern of what humanity looked like during the Middle and Late Pleistocene. For some, it is bad enough that Neanderthals may have made art and buried their dead, once thought to be uniquely human features. Extending such behaviours to these small-brained creatures would seem to further erode what separates us from the rest of the natural world, and what we thought made us exceptional. While we cannot conclusively pinpoint when, how, or why advanced cognitive and behavioural traits arose, they may have not been so unique to us after all. Nonetheless, it is clear that we Homo sapiens, the last survivors of our genus, the chiefs, engineers, and artists, did have some type of evolutionary advantage, and it is possible that our neuron-packed cortexes, driven by fire, played a role. Whether used for cooking, scaring off predators, warmth, light, or social bonding, fire has been fundamental to our lineage. Tangible traces of the past are eventually lost to the earth, but using fire remains one direct connection we have to those of us who came before. We Homo sapiens are a species shaped by fire, inheriting it from our ancestors, and today we cannot live without it. In order to maintain our new, large, energetically expensive brains that were made possible by cooking, we can no longer rely solely on raw foods long term for sufficient calories or nutrients. People who subscribe to the raw food diet generally experience chronic energy shortages, regardless of whether their diets include raw meat. Moreover, nearly half of the women who menstruate and excessively eat raw foods develop amenorrhea, losing the ability to become pregnant. A species cannot survive if it cannot reproduce. Reproductive difficulties also manifest in our skeletons. Homo sapiens have large skulls and narrow, twisted, and rigid birth canals that require the fetus to do a series of rotations during birth, making natural births long, painful, and dangerous. Without midwifery or medical intervention, maternal and infant death rates increase dramatically. Globally, obstructed labour accounts for up to 70% of perinatal deaths during birth. Assisted births have been recorded worldwide in ancient history, whether through assistance or the development of tools such as birthing stones or chairs. On the contrary, assisted birth is very rare in other primates, whose births do not require external aid. Despite these dangers, our species continues to survive. Though we like to think we have risen above the constraints of nature, we do still operate within them, and nature has decided that our large, demanding brains are worth these risks. Our journey began 2 million years ago in a species that would not have been recognizably human today. From stealthy scavengers hiding in the shadows of the Pliocene to intelligent beings who create our own light. Our story is a testament to the power of adaptation and intellect. But our species' story is not yet finished. Our brains are still changing and have actually decreased in size by nearly 10% in the last 3,000 years. This could be a result of the collective intelligence that reduces the cognitive burden on the individual. As we continue to develop increasingly advanced technologies, there will surely be even more changes in our brains and cognition. Who knows what will come next?